Welcome to the Automotive Diagnostic Podcast. We're going to explore ways to sharpen our diagnostic skills, find learning resources, and hear from experts in the automotive field.
Hey, have you ever been faced with the challenge of sourcing, installing, and programming a used control module in a vehicle? I know a lot of us have. It seems to be happening more and more often today with the volume of control modules on vehicles, the cost of some new ones, or even the availability of new control modules. In some cases, used may be the only option. So what do you do here? I strongly recommend checking out SJ Auto Solutions and Tommy Oliva. Tommy offers a cloning service for used control modules to make these things plug and play for the vehicle that you're working on. In a lot of cases, he is also able to source the control modules if you're unable to locate one for the vehicle that you're working on. But once you get connected with Tommy, he's going to offer fantastic support from start to finish to make sure that that control module is going to work in your application. He's also got tech support that he offers through his website, along with some free resources there as well on information about used control module programming. So make sure to check out SJ Auto Solutions. I can't recommend that enough. Hey, what's going on, automotive world? Welcome to another episode of the Automotive Diagnostic Podcast. My name is Sean Tipping. I'll be your host once again for this week's episode. Thank you so much for joining me. Just me on the show this week, and I'm going to talk about something that, I've dealt with as long as I've been fixing cars and diagnosing module issues on cars, but have had it come up a couple times recently on some newer vehicles that this was the solution to actually moving forward, to getting the vehicle back to a working state, to get rid of warning lights, codes, whatever it might be. And it's the thing that worked, even though it's very simple. And as you could tell by the title of the episode, it's a little tongue-in-cheek of if you've ever called for tech support on anything, right? The internet modem at your house or any piece of technology like a computer or something, one of the first things they ask is, have you unplugged it and plugged it back in? And of course, when those people call, I'm like, yeah, of course I tried that, even if I haven't. But a lot of times it actually does fix the problem. And I'm going to be talking about a few instances of that here today where if you have not tried a battery disconnect, and what I'm talking, there's different ways you can do this, but what I'm talking about is completely removing power and ground to either a specific control module or the entire vehicle. And there's different ways that you can do this, but to do basically a hard reset. One of the shops I go to, they call it brain deading the module. And this may also involve doing a capacitive discharge, which not only is disconnecting the battery itself, but then touching the two cables together, right? So you take the positive and the negative off the battery. Now, keep in mind here, this is if there's only one battery. If you have multiple batteries in a car, you need to disconnect all of them before you do this next part. But then once disconnected, you would touch the positive and the negative together, and that's going to drain down any reserve power that any modules might have in some sort of capacitor or something like that, where some modules will have a setup so that they can retain memory for a short period of time, even after the battery is disconnected. And this is going to take care of that. So everything is going to be, a full hard reset, brand new, just rebooting the system, if you will. Now, again, you can just disconnect a module, and this may perform something similar, and I'll give you an example of that. But doing the full capacitive discharge is going to reset everything on the vehicle. Again, you're going to need to know the electrical setup of the vehicle. Do you have more than one battery that's connected to that system? If you do, you don't want to take those cables off of just one battery and touch them together. That's a problem. Of course, there's a lot of nuance that goes into that discussion. Basically, you need to know the electrical system on the car that you're working on before you attempt something like this. And if you're not sure, and you've got a specific module in question, then maybe just go after that particular module rather than the whole system. I'll give you an example of that on a BMW that had a 48 volt system, and I wasn't in the moment confident enough to disconnect everything in that electrical system, so I just disconnected the module and it ended up working for me. But doing this reset can save you a lot of time and fix the issue in a lot of cases instead of beating your head against the wall trying to fix these module issues or codes or warning lights, and nothing else seems to work. So I'm going to run through 3 vehicles that I've dealt with recently where the capacitive discharge or the battery disconnect from either the vehicle or the module in question fixed the vehicle. Now, we should mention, is it permanent? Is it a permanent fix to whatever caused that? Maybe, maybe not. Is it going to happen again, right? If your computer freezes up and you unplug it and that brings it back to life, is it going to freeze again? It might. When is it going to happen? I don't know. And that's kind of where we're at with some of these situations. This might happen again. We don't know. If it does, well, okay, we may have to replace a particular module that seems to be causing this problem or is involved with the problem. Maybe there's a software update, and that is something that you should search for, right? If this is an issue, you discover, hey, this module is having some strange fault that I can't get rid of any other way. And again, I'll give you some examples of that. But either unplugging the module, plugging back in, or doing capacitive discharge on the whole system fixes the problem. Okay, is there a software update for this module? Is there a hardware update for this module, right? Is there a service bulletin that just says, hey, the radio screen in this GMC Terrain locks up from time to time. We don't have an update for the software, but you have to replace it with an updated hardware piece. That's possible too. So this isn't necessarily a permanent fix. It might be. I'll give you the first one I talk about. I feel like it is a good fix. I don't think there's anything else that needs to be done in that instance, but there could definitely be a situation where, hey, a module is going to continue to have this error and either update or replacement is necessary. Actually, one that does come to mind, just one that's in memory from like early on when I was a technician in the Chevy trucks of the early 2000s, they would have a memory seat module that would just go into like a logic lock and none of the seat functions would work once this happened. And I actually don't remember, you might not even have communication with it at that point, I'm not sure, but disconnecting the module and then plugging it back in brought it back to life. And they had a software update to fix that, right? You could go through SPS and update that module, and that was supposed to prevent this logic lockup from happening. So take a look and see, because there might be a fix or there might be known information out there to correct the issue that you're temporarily fixing with the capacitive discharge. But in that moment, that's the only thing that's going to move you forward or get your module or your vehicle back to a working state. So we don't want to forget about this. And that's kind of the reason for this episode, is sometimes this is something that is easy to overlook or not think about. Hey, I should try this. I should also mention, this shouldn't necessarily be the first thing that you do, right? Oh, hey, this radio screen's locked up. I better disconnect the battery and see if that fixes it. You should do some investigative work. Do your pre-scan, look at the modules in question, record the codes, see if doing anything else does fix this. But if you don't seem to be getting anywhere with the normal diagnostic methods, or here's the other thing, you're about to call a module and say, hey, this module's bad, I've got to replace it. And in all honesty, it might fix it because you're disconnecting that module from the network and putting a new one in. But could it come back to life just with a battery disconnect? And again, sometimes that's the key. What if it's a situation where you've already replaced the module and now you've got something weird going on? So I will tell you about that. This is a 2016 Chevrolet Colorado. The shop had replaced the chassis control module, which is also the fuel pump control module, with a brand new one. And after they replace this module and then we come in, we program it, there's a check engine light on and it will not shut off. We did key cycles, full power downs with key off, which that alone sometimes is the answer, but we waited until everything went to sleep, turned it back on, tried clearing codes in the ECM. We're looking for pending codes, nothing's there, check engine light stays on. We end up disconnecting the battery, and I didn't even have to do a capacitive discharge on this one. I just disconnected the battery, reconnected the battery, check engine light is off. That's it. So in that case, I don't think I have to do anything else. That might just be some glitch, some error from putting a brand new, and this was from the dealer, module in that vehicle, and it caused the engine control module to throw the MIL on for some reason. Hard to say exactly why. I don't know what's going on at the module level there, but there was something about the data that it was or wasn't getting from that module, maybe in an unprogrammed state, that caused it to just say, hey, the light's on, I'm not shutting it off. Would enough key cycles turn it off? Maybe, but it was a lot quicker just to disconnect the battery, reconnect it, and we're fixed. So now we wrote that down in our notes because odds are we're going to get another, 16-ish Chevy Colorado that needs a chassis control module programmed. And we might be there sitting like, why is the check engine light on when there are no codes? And of course the shop's going to blame us. Hey, you just programmed this and the check engine light's on. You guys need to come figure this out. And I mean, in a way, that is our responsibility as the programmers to at least, alert them to that. Like, you need to do a battery disconnect, but we'll just do that for them in that case. It's easy enough to do. So one of the other ones that I dealt with recently was this show is brought to you by Auto Rescue Tools and Isaac Rodell. If you've been looking for a programming laptop, but you're not sure which one to buy or how to set it up, especially if you want to program multiple brands. You've got some domestic vehicles, you've got European vehicles. Can the same software go on the same laptop? What size hard drive do I need? All those questions. Isaac's your guy. He can custom set up programming laptops that are ready to tackle any make or model. I've got one of these laptops myself, and I can say that it is outstanding, and it really streamlines the process by having everything you need in one device. So if you're looking for something like that, I highly recommend checking out autorescuetools.com. You'll also find scan tools, diagnostic equipment, key cutting equipment, and much more. Check out the link in the show notes. I highly recommend it. 2023 BMW X7. And I think I mentioned this vehicle it might have been the module communication episode 3 or 4 episodes ago. And I was just getting involved with it. And this one, I burnt up a lot of time on this thing before I found out just disconnecting the module took care of my problem. Now, for a little bit of backstory on this one, we found my technician that was working on it found some open wires that were going from the rear differential lock control module to the rear differential unit. Now, this was very obvious, very apparent that, hey, there's some harness damage here. It was backed by the rear bumper. You guys fix this and then, should be good. But if you need us to come clear codes or check it out afterwards, give us a call. And what they were getting was a warning light on the dashboard that said rear differential locking reduced, and that would pop up on the dash as soon as you started the vehicle, and a code in the VIP module, which is virtual integration platform or something to that effect. There was a code in there that's saying that the regulated locking differential function was unavailable. And this code would repeatedly set. Now, there were no codes in our rear differential control module, or it's listed on the module list as GHAS, or the rear differential module. This is in the right trunk area of the vehicle. There was no codes in this module, but there were codes in the VIP module that were saying, hey, there's an issue with this. We're shutting down functions here. And we could not get this to go away no matter what we did, including using ITSTA. And being as it was a 23, I wasn't going to rely on aftermarket scan tools outside of, our first attempts to clear codes or to read codes. My assumption was there's something ITSTA is going to show us that the aftermarket scan tool didn't, or there's a reset that needs to happen, or a learn, or something that needs to occur that the factory scan tool is capable of that the aftermarket isn't. That was my thought going into this one. And I tried, and I got ITSTA going, and I wasted a lot of time trying to get this light to turn off, and nothing I did. No function, and there were some functions in ITSTA that the aftermarket tools didn't have, but no function worked, and it showed me nothing new as far as codes or information went that I wasn't able to see. I was just using a top-down on this thing otherwise, and outside of a few reset functions that I couldn't find within top-down, it was essentially the same, exactly the same, and I got basically nowhere with it after an hour and a half of messing with ITSTA, and most of that is waiting for the stupid thing to boot up. But anyways, I finally went to this rear diff control module, and my intention was I was going to start checking circuits to see if something was still open, right? That was my assumption going into it, is like, well, maybe they did some wiring repair wrong and for some reason it's not coding for it, but can I actually start measuring these circuits and make sure that they're connected to what they need to be connected to? I figured I was going to find something wrong with the repair, and for some reason we're not getting a trouble code. Well, turns out just disconnecting that module, and I was doing that so I could do circuit checks, and then plugging the module back in, got rid of the code in the other module. Then it was happy. So there was some reset that needed to happen within this rear diff module electrically that caused everybody to be happy. Now, if you're a BMW expert out there and you work on these things all the time, maybe there is a different way that I could have gotten here, but oh my gosh, I tried every single reset and relearn and clear code option that I could find, again, using the factory tool. So I don't know that there was a different way. Now, could I have done a full capacitive discharge on this system? Probably, but I would have had to have done a little bit of education for myself on the 48 volt system on this one and how that works when you attempt to do like a full system capacitive discharge. And to be honest, I didn't go that far on this one. Just disconnecting the module in question was enough. But again, it's an example where you might want to be careful of just disconnecting, the 12 volt battery and putting them together. Is that going to be enough? Is that safe in that instance to do that if you only disconnect the 12 volt? Hard to say because I haven't tried it. So you'd have to do a little bit of reading on that. And again, maybe you're an expert BMW tech listening to this and you know the answer to that. But that was another example of one recently where I wasted a ton of time on that car trying to get the light off, and disconnecting the module and plugging it back in was the fix. It reset it. And that vehicle's been gone for several weeks now, so it's not like it popped back up with another issue. It was good to go after that point. All right, last one. I just dealt with this week, and I actually reached out to some friends for some help on this one because it was beating me up as well. This was a 21 Audi A4. And this showed up to one of my customers' shops, and there was no history on this car. It was a Carvana car, right? Somebody had purchased it from there, and then now they have it. They have a problem with it, and now it's at this shop. I have no history on anything that had been replaced or not replaced on this vehicle prior to them looking at it, which maybe if I did, I don't know if that really would have changed my path, but going into it, that was my assumption, is that something had been changed on this vehicle module wise, and that's the reason for these issues. So let me set up what we were dealing with on this vehicle when we got into it, and then I'll get to what eventually fixed it. So there is a series of modules on Audi vehicles where if you replace that module, particularly with a used control module, you will set a component protection code, and the functions for that module will most likely be locked out until you remedy the component protection active. That's really all it is. It'll say component protection active, and you need to disable that using the factory scan tool, which is Otis. I'm not aware of another tool that'll do that. There might be something out there. Obviously, you could probably clone some of these modules and get them to work. But as far as scan tool wise, disabling component protection, you need an online connection using Otis in order to remove said component protection. Now, depending on the vehicle, that'll be different modules, and some of them are surprising. It'll be like a sunroof module or an HVAC module, some driver assistance systems like the lane departure and things like that can set component protection. And this is slightly different than the immobilizer system of the car, right? So the immobilizer is going to prevent the vehicle from actually keying up and starting, whereas a component protection, your vehicle is probably still going to start and run, and this one did, but you have certain functions that are locked out and, of course, the code that's present. So it's like an immobilizer, but different. It's kind of like a radio locked on a GM product, right? You can still start up and drive the vehicle, but it's just going to say radio locked until you fix the VIN number in the radio to match the body control module. Same thing here, but this is Audi's version of it. So I go in to this Audi and this 21 Audi, and I find that there are a ton of modules that list that they are in component protection mode. This would be almost all of the driver assistance systems, the lane watch camera, the front radar, both of the blind spot modules, the emergency call module, the instrument cluster, the HVAC module, and there were several others as well. I have a feeling like every module that could set component protection was on this vehicle, or I don't know, at least it was close to it. So I had a huge list, right? And so now I'm wondering, I'm like, okay, well, how many things were actually replaced on this? Because generally what you see is the module that has been replaced is going to have component protection active, but none of the other modules are. They might code for like communication or invalid data. You will get that, especially if the module's not coded correctly for the vehicle, but you don't see it where every module has component protection active. And that's what I found on this car. And again, not every module, but there was probably a list of 8 or 9 of them that had the component protection active. So I go into this and I start looking at it, and this was a little bit of education for me on this exact platform of this vehicle. The gateway module is the component protection master in this application, meaning it is the thing that determines if said modules belong to the vehicle or not. And so I really was looking at this to see, did someone change the gateway module? That was kind of my thought going into this, is like, oh, okay, well, somebody put a gateway in and it doesn't match the vehicle, then yeah, we could have component protection active in multiple modules. But that didn't appear to be the case. And I actually went through each one of these modules individually, looked at the VIN numbers, and they all matched the vehicle. I mean, there's a possibility maybe somehow, the VIN number was changed, but it still didn't belong to the vehicle. But what I did was I tried removing component protection on all of these modules. And you can do this a couple different ways. You can go into the individual modules and run a component protection removal function. It builds it in the test plan for you in Otis, actually. Or you can go to the gateway and you can basically remove component protection on everything. And I tried it both ways. And here's the thing. It said successful every single time I tried. If I tried it individually on a module, it said successful. If I tried it on the gateway and it ran through everything, which does take some time, so be aware of that, it said successful on every single module. I even tried running the replace control module for the gateway. And as I'm doing these things, I'm like, okay, am I going to make the situation worse? Because that's totally possible. You start running functions on modules when maybe they've been replaced or you don't know which one was replaced, and you could make the situation worse. But at this point, I'm like, well, I'm going to try it and see what happens. So I did the replace module function for the gateway. All successful. It did the component protection removal again, codes the module, initializes the module, all that stuff. And same thing, same problem. All these modules still code the same way. All the functions are limited. You can see I was using the instrument cluster as my immediate indicator, because it would just say safe CP, and it was just component protection, and the HVAC module wasn't turning on. It was just blinking one of the lights. So it was very obvious that nothing changed here. So I get a log from this thing after I spent a bunch of time on it, trying to figure out what was going on. And I send it to some friends and I'm talking to some other people. And while I was leaving the shop, I told them, hey, why don't we do a battery disconnect on this thing overnight, do the capacitive discharge on it, and we'll come back tomorrow. It was actually a couple days for me until I could get back there, and we'll try again, but a hard reset might be a good idea in this case, and should I have done this sooner on this vehicle? Potentially, but I had them do that. I talked with some friends about some of the stuff, and we had some ideas and some things to look at, but I came back a couple days later, and the first thing I tried after we connected the battery again was I did the component protection again, and I was actually looking to get some information specifically from the log when that happened. That was going to be my idea of where I was going with this. What I did was I took the log and because if you've ever used Otis, you get this, you can do the long log, which just documents like everything you've done on that car, every button you clicked, all the background processes that happen that you're not necessarily seeing, and all of the information for it. And it makes this, like, depending on, how much you do on the car, like 1,000-page document that has all kinds of data, and you can search through it. But I was using ChatGPT to help me like kind of summarize, like, hey, can you find specific points within this log where we're attempting to do component protection removal? Do you see errors going on here? It like help guide me to the part of this log that I need to look at that's showing what the actual problem is or if it's successful. And I was going to try to break it down that way. But here's the deal. It worked after I did it that second time. And this was after the battery disconnect. And I have a feeling that was the key, because I tried all of this multiple times prior. And then as soon as we did a battery disconnect and I did it again, it was all good. Everything was happy. Nobody was upset. No codes, no lights, no warnings. I, powered it down and fired it back up multiple times, ran, a full system scan. Everybody's thumbs up, ready to go, and everything works on the car. I'm like, okay, so, and I had also looked for TSBs for software. Interestingly enough, there was one for a newer Audi. It was like a 23, where there is a software update to the comfort control module, which is BCM2, that can cause similar problems. But they give you an SVM code, which if you've never used Otis, if you want to do like a software update on a module, you need to, or one of the ways to do it is to input a code from a service bulletin. And I tried that. I was just like, well, let's try it. And it said it didn't apply to this one. So not a fix. But like I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, you want to look for service bulletins, known problems, any references to like, hey, there might be a fix for this type of thing happening. And, it's a 21. Maybe they still come out with a TSB at some point. Maybe it's a replacement of a gateway. Maybe it's something to do with the comfort control module. It did mention in my research that one of the two modules that could really cause, widespread component protection codes to set is either the gateway or the comfort control module, BCM2. Like, those are the two main players that could potentially cause this. And the TSB for the 23 kind of validated that BCM2 is a possible contributor to this. So which module did I reset with the capacitive discharge that allowed me to actually get everything to work properly? Hard to say. I don't know. My guess is it's one of those two modules. But if I run into a situation like this again on a newer Audi vehicle like this, that is one of the things that I'm going to be trying. Of course, I'm going to look at everything, document what codes I have. That's really important. So you have the documented information of what was there when there was a problem, because you're going to lose all that when you do your capacitive discharge. But try it. Try unplugging it and plugging it back in and see if that fixes your problem. You'd be surprised a lot of the time. So hopefully you found that interesting. Maybe it's just a good reminder in your process to have that as one of the steps that you do if you're running into some weird issues that just seem to be putting you into circles. But that's all I got for today. Thank you so much for listening. Always appreciate it. Let's all get out there, start fixing the world one car at a time.